Sometimes the biggest mistake a person makes is assuming they already know who's standing in front of them. The words would make perfect sense later. But on that bright Thursday morning outside St. Matthew's Medical Center in Charlotte, North Carolina, nobody was thinking about mistakes. They were thinking about rules. The hospital entrance buzzed with the usual rhythm of the city. Automatic doors slid open and shut. Nurses crossed the sidewalk carrying coffee cups. Visitors hurried through the parking lot with worried faces and ringing phones pressed to their ears. The summer sun reflected off windshields, turning rows of parked cars into sheets of flashing silver. Then a sharp voice cut through the noise. "Ma'am, step away from the vehicle." Heads turned instantly. Near the emergency drop-off zone, a young officer stood beside a dark gray SUV parked in a clearly marked no parking area. Officer Ethan Walker looked every bit the part of authority. Tall, confident, and dressed in a freshly pressed uniform, he held a citation pad in one hand while pointing toward the painted curb with the other. His expression carried the certainty of someone who rarely expected to be questioned. Standing beside the SUV was a black woman in her mid-40s. Her name was Maya Reynolds. She wore simple jeans, a navy cardigan, and comfortable walking shoes. Nothing about her appearance attracted attention. Nothing suggested wealth, influence, or importance. If anything, she looked like someone who had spent the morning helping other people instead of worrying about herself. Yet while several people nearby whispered nervously and stepped back, Maya remained calm. She glanced toward the hospital entrance, then back toward Ethan. "Officer," she said quietly, "I understand the vehicle isn't supposed to be here. I only needed a few minutes." Ethan's jaw tightened. "The signs are clear." He pointed toward the curb. "No parking means no parking." Maya nodded once. "Someone inside needed immediate assistance. That doesn't change the law." The words landed hard against the warm morning air. Around them, more people slowed their pace. A hospital volunteer paused near the entrance. A delivery driver stopped pushing a cart. Even a pair of medical interns exchanged uneasy looks. Something about the scene felt bigger than a parking violation. Maya looked toward the glass doors again. Through them, a glimpse of activity flashed across the lobby. Her eyes lingered there for a moment before returning to Ethan. Surprisingly, she didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't complain. Instead, she simply folded her hands in front of her and took a slow breath. That reaction somehow irritated Ethan even more. He was used to excuses. He was used to protests. He was used to people insisting they deserved special treatment. Calm acceptance wasn't part of the script. "License and registration," he said. Maya reached into her purse and handed them over without hesitation. Ethan examined the documents while the growing crowd watched. The sunlight reflected off the polished badge on his chest. Somewhere nearby, an ambulance siren echoed faintly in the distance. Maya stood quietly beside her SUV, her face unreadable, but there was something unusual in her eyes. Not fear, not anger, almost sadness, as if she were looking at someone headed toward a lesson they didn't yet know they needed to learn. And as Ethan glanced down at her information and prepared to take the next step, neither of them realized that before this day was over, one phone call would change everything. The parking lot slowly returned to motion, but the tension lingered in the air like heat rising from asphalt after a summer storm. Ethan walked toward his patrol vehicle with Maya's documents in hand, confident he was handling just another routine situation. What he did not know was that Maya Reynolds had spent most of her life becoming invisible. Not because she lacked ability, not because she lacked intelligence, but because experience had taught her that many people only saw what they expected to see. 20 years earlier, she had been a college student carrying 2 jobs while earning top grades. Later she became a community advocate, spending long hours helping families navigate medical systems, housing programs, and social services. She never sought recognition. She preferred solving problems quietly. The habit stayed with her. Even now, there was nothing remarkable about the way she stood beside her vehicle. Her cardigan was simple. Her shoes were practical. Her purse showed signs of years of use. To most people passing by, she looked like an ordinary woman running an ordinary errand. Yet inside the hospital, a frightened family was waiting because of her. Earlier that morning, Maya had received a call from a neighbor whose elderly father had suddenly become disoriented and weak. The ambulance response time was delayed because of unusually heavy traffic across the city. Rather than wait, Maya drove across town, helped the man into her SUV, and brought him directly to the emergency department. The drop-off lane had been packed. Vehicles lined the curb. Nurses rushed between entrances. Faced with the choice between finding a legal parking space several hundred feet away or getting the man immediate attention, Maya made her decision in seconds. She parked where she could and focused on the person who needed help. Now she stood patiently while strangers watched and judged a situation they did not understand. Near the hospital entrance, an older volunteer named Mrs. Collins observed everything from behind a glass window. She had seen Maya arrive earlier. She had seen the elderly man struggling to walk. She had seen Maya support him with one arm while speaking calmly enough to ease his fear. The volunteer frowned as she watched the current scene unfold. Something about it felt unfair, though she could not explain why. Outside, Ethan reviewed the information on Maya's license. Charlotte address. Clean record. No outstanding issues. Nothing unusual. He looked up briefly. Maya met his gaze for a moment, then looked toward the hospital again. The concern in her eyes was not for herself. It was for the patient she had brought. That detail went unnoticed. Ethan was already focused on procedure. Rules created order. Order created safety. At least that was what he believed. A radio crackled softly from his shoulder. Nearby traffic moved through the intersection. A warm breeze carried the scent of freshly cut grass from a landscaped area beside the building. Everything seemed ordinary. Yet somewhere on an upper floor of the hospital, events were already unfolding that would connect Maya Reynolds to Ethan Walker in a way neither of them could possibly imagine. And before the day reached its end, the quiet woman standing beside the gray SUV would become impossible for him to overlook. Officer Ethan Walker had spent most of his life believing that rules separated responsible people from irresponsible ones. That belief did not come from training alone. It came from growing up in the shadow of Captain Daniel Walker, one of the most respected law enforcement leaders in Mecklenburg County. Ethan learned early that the Walker name carried weight. Teachers knew it. Coaches knew it. City officials knew it. By the time he graduated from the police academy, many people already expected him to succeed. Over the years, that expectation slowly transformed into certainty. Ethan trusted his judgment. He trusted procedures. Most of all, he trusted first impressions. Standing beside his patrol vehicle, he finished entering information into the system and glanced once more toward Maya Reynolds. She had not moved. She remained near the gray SUV, her attention drifting repeatedly toward the hospital entrance. To Ethan, that looked suspicious. To Maya, it was concern. The difference between those interpretations would matter later. Across the parking lot, several bystanders continued watching. Some whispered quietly. Others checked their phones. The scene had attracted attention because people sensed tension, even when no one raised their voice. Maya stood alone, calm and composed, while Ethan projected authority with every movement. The contrast was impossible to ignore. Inside the hospital, meanwhile, an entirely different story was unfolding. Doctors evaluated the elderly man Maya had transported earlier that morning. Nurses moved efficiently between rooms. Monitors glowed softly beneath fluorescent lights. Family members waited anxiously in plastic chairs, clutching paper coffee cups and hoping for good news. Among them sat a middle-aged woman named Linda Harper, the patient's daughter. She had arrived only minutes after her father was admitted. More than once she asked staff about the woman who brought him in. More than once she was told that Maya had remained outside. Linda looked through the large lobby windows and finally spotted her standing near the patrol car. Confusion crossed her face. Why was the person who helped her father still out there? Back outside, Ethan received a message through his radio. A routine update. Nothing urgent. Nothing unusual. Yet the interruption seemed to reinforce his confidence that he was handling everything correctly. He approached Maya again. The sunlight reflected off the hospital windows behind them, filling the space with bright white light. "You could have parked in the visitor garage," Ethan said. Maya nodded politely. "I could have." "Then why did you not?" For the first time she hesitated. Her eyes shifted toward the entrance. "Because sometimes a few minutes matter." Ethan interpreted the answer as an excuse. Maya meant it literally. Neither realized they were speaking from entirely different worlds. A gust of warm Carolina air moved across the parking lot, rustling nearby trees. Somewhere overhead, a helicopter crossed the blue sky. The city continued moving as if nothing significant was happening. Yet unseen connections were already forming. A worried family inside the hospital. A police officer outside convinced he was right. And a woman whose quiet decision to help a stranger was about to place her at the center of a story none of them could yet understand. The situation should have ended with a warning. That was what several people in the parking lot quietly believed. Instead, it continued to grow heavier with every passing minute. Ethan Walker stood beside his patrol vehicle reviewing the final details of the report he was preparing. Procedure mattered. Documentation mattered. In his mind, allowing exceptions created problems. Across from him, Maya Reynolds remained remarkably calm. The longer she stood there, the more unusual her composure seemed. Most people became frustrated when confronted by authority. Most people argued. Maya did neither. She simply watched the hospital entrance as though something far more important was happening beyond those sliding glass doors. Then the doors opened. A woman hurried outside, scanning the parking lot. It was Linda Harper. Her face carried the exhaustion of someone who had spent hours worrying about a loved one. The moment she spotted Maya, relief washed over her features. She crossed the sidewalk quickly. "Miss Reynolds," she called. Maya turned. "How is he?" The question came immediately. Not a word about herself. Not a word about the situation. Only concern for the man she had helped. Linda smiled for the first time all morning. "The doctors say he is stable. They said bringing him in when you did probably made a huge difference." Several nearby bystanders exchanged glances. Ethan looked up from his paperwork. Linda continued speaking before anyone could interrupt. "I have been trying to find you. My family wanted to thank you." Maya offered a gentle smile. "There is no need. I am glad he is getting care." The simplicity of the response surprised Linda. Most people would have accepted praise. Maya seemed almost uncomfortable receiving it. For a brief moment, the atmosphere shifted. The crowd saw not a parking violation but a woman who had stopped her day to help a stranger. Yet Ethan remained focused on the facts in front of him. The vehicle had still been parked illegally. The rules still existed. The explanation changed nothing in his mind. "Ma'am," he said firmly, addressing Linda, "the circumstances do not change the violation." Linda blinked. "She was helping my father." "I understand that. Then why are we still standing here?" Ethan paused. It was a reasonable question, but he had already committed himself to a course of action. Backing away now felt like admitting he had misjudged the situation. Pride quietly entered the space where judgment should have remained. Maya sensed it immediately. Her eyes settled on Ethan for a moment. There was no anger in her expression. No resentment. Only a strange sadness that made him uncomfortable without understanding why. A warm breeze moved through the parking lot again. Tree branches swayed near the edge of the property. Above them, white clouds drifted slowly across a brilliant Carolina sky. The world seemed peaceful, yet tension continued building beneath the surface. Then Maya spoke softly. "Officer Walker, I hope the rest of your day goes well." The words were simple, respectful, unexpected. Ethan stared at her. Most people would have challenged him by now. Instead, she offered kindness. What neither of them knew was that before sunset, events inside that hospital would connect their lives in a way neither could possibly foresee, and the confidence Ethan carried so easily that morning would soon be tested by something far more powerful than procedure. By early afternoon, the crowd had finally dispersed. The parking lot returned to its ordinary rhythm, but the weight of the morning lingered in ways no one could see. Maya Reynolds quietly paid the citation and prepared to leave. She could have argued. She could have filed a complaint. She could have spent the rest of the day defending herself. Instead, she chose peace. As she walked toward her vehicle, Linda Harper caught up with her carrying a small paper bag from the hospital cafe. "Please," she said, offering it with both hands. "At least let me buy you lunch." Maya smiled warmly. "Save your money for your father." Linda lowered her eyes. "You helped my family when nobody else could." Maya hesitated, then accepted the bag, not because she wanted it, but because refusing would have hurt the woman's feelings. Sometimes kindness meant accepting gratitude as much as giving it. Across the lot, Ethan watched the exchange from a distance. Something about it bothered him. The facts still supported his decision, yet the certainty he had felt earlier was beginning to crack. Maya did not act like someone trying to avoid responsibility. She acted like someone carrying responsibilities far greater than her own. Still, he pushed the thought aside. His shift continued. Calls came in. Reports needed filing. Traffic stops, welfare checks, routine patrols. The day moved forward. Then, shortly after 3 o'clock, his radio erupted with urgency. Officer Walker, respond immediately. St. Matthew's Medical Center. Family emergency. Ethan froze. His stomach tightened before the dispatcher even finished. Speaking. Your daughter has been admitted to the emergency department. For a second, the world seemed to lose all sound. The traffic around him faded. The city disappeared. There was only one thought left. Emma. His 8-year-old daughter. Within minutes, Ethan was racing toward the same hospital parking lot he had stood in all morning. The bright afternoon sunlight now felt harsh against his eyes. Every red light felt too long. Every second felt stolen. When he finally reached the hospital, he moved through the entrance with a level of fear he had never experienced before. Nurses directed him toward a treatment area where doctors were already working. Emma lay in a hospital bed, pale and exhausted. Machines hummed softly nearby. Ethan rushed to her side. Sweetheart. Emma opened her eyes weakly. Daddy. The single word nearly broke him. A physician entered moments later carrying a tablet. His expression was professional but concerned. Officer Walker, your daughter is stable right now, but we have a challenge. Ethan stood immediately. Whatever she needs, do it. The doctor nodded. We are trying. Emma has a rare blood type. We need a compatible donor quickly. Ethan felt the room tilt beneath him. How long? We are searching now. The doctor paused. We have already contacted regional databases. Outside the room, afternoon sunlight streamed through the hospital windows, painting long golden rectangles across the floor. Ethan stared through the glass toward the parking lot below. For the first time that day, rules, procedures, citations, and pride felt very small. All that mattered was the little girl resting quietly in the bed beside him. The hours that followed felt strangely quiet. The emergency department remained busy, phones rang, carts rolled across polished floors, and nurses moved from room to room. Yet for Ethan Walker, the world had narrowed to a single hospital bed and the small hand resting beneath a white blanket. Emma slept peacefully for the moment, but every soft beep from the monitor seemed louder than the last. Ethan sat beside her, his uniform jacket folded across his lap, staring at the fading sunlight beyond the window. Orange light stretched across the city skyline, turning the glass buildings downtown into mirrors of fire. He had spent years responding to emergencies, comforting frightened people, and telling families that everything possible was being done. Now he understood what those families felt. Waiting was its own kind of helplessness. A gentle knock interrupted the silence. The physician stepped into the room carrying another tablet. Ethan immediately stood. The doctor offered a reassuring smile, but his eyes revealed exhaustion from a long day. We are making progress, he said. Ethan exhaled slowly. Did you find a donor? The physician nodded once. We located a compatible match earlier this afternoon. Relief rushed through Ethan so quickly that he nearly lost his balance. He glanced toward Emma and then back at the doctor. Who is it? The physician hesitated for a brief moment, not out of concern but surprise. The donor had already completed the process before we even identified the recipient. Ethan frowned. What does that mean? The doctor looked down at the screen. The donor came in voluntarily after receiving a hospital request for rare blood types. She regularly participates in emergency donor programs. Outside the room, the last light of day slipped below the horizon. Shadows stretched across the hallway. Ethan felt hope returning for the first time since arriving. I would like to thank her, he said quietly. Most people would. The doctor smiled faintly. She asked for nothing in return. Something about those words lingered in the air. Ethan thought about all the people he had encountered throughout the day. Faces blurred together in his memory. Hospital staff, visitors, drivers, families, strangers. The doctor checked a few notes before continuing. The donation was completed hours ago. Frankly, the timing could not have been better. Ethan lowered his eyes. She may have saved my daughter. That is a fair way to describe it. Silence settled between them. Through the partially open door came distant sounds of rolling wheels, quiet conversations, and the steady rhythm of a hospital continuing its work long after sunset. Ethan looked at Emma again. Her breathing was calm now, peaceful. For the first time all day, he allowed himself to believe everything might be all right. Then the doctor glanced back at the tablet one final time. His expression shifted slightly, almost as if he had just recognized a familiar name. Officer Walker, he said carefully. There is something else you should know about the donor. Ethan turned toward him. The doctor looked directly into his eyes. You have already met her. The word struck Ethan harder than any accusation ever could. You have already met her. For several seconds he simply stared at the physician, unable to speak. Then a face appeared in his mind with perfect clarity. A gray SUV. A calm voice. A woman standing quietly beneath the Carolina sun while he insisted on procedure. Maya Reynolds, he asked. The doctor nodded. Yes. Ethan felt the air leave his lungs. The room suddenly seemed smaller. The steady hum of hospital equipment faded into the background. All he could hear was his own memory replaying every moment from earlier that day. Maya looking toward the hospital entrance. Maya worrying about someone else instead of herself. Maya thanking him even after he had made her day more difficult. And now Maya was the reason his daughter had a chance to recover. Does she know? Ethan asked quietly. Know what? That Emma is my daughter. The physician shook his head. Not when she donated. She responded to a hospital request for rare blood donors. She agreed immediately. The match was confirmed later. Ethan lowered himself into the chair beside Emma's bed. The realization settled over him piece by piece. Maya had helped a stranger in the morning. She had remained respectful through an uncomfortable encounter. Then she had spent part of her afternoon helping save a child she did not even know. A child connected to the very officer who had judged her. Through the window, darkness had fully arrived. City lights sparkled across Charlotte like scattered stars. Reflections shimmered against the glass. Ethan looked at his sleeping daughter and felt a deep sense of shame creeping into places pride had occupied only hours earlier. A soft knock interrupted the silence. Linda Harper stepped into the room carrying a small bouquet of flowers. She stopped when she noticed Ethan's expression. You found out, did you not? She asked gently. Ethan looked up. You knew. Linda nodded. Maya does this all the time. He frowned. What do you mean? Linda smiled sadly. She helps people. That is what she does. Ethan remained silent. Linda stepped closer to the window. My father is alive because she stopped what she was doing and brought him here. Last winter she organized meals for seniors after a storm knocked out power. A few months ago she spent weekends driving veterans to medical appointments. Ethan listened without moving. Each sentence felt heavier than the one before. She never talks about it, Linda continued. Most people never know. The flowers trembled slightly in her hands as she smiled. That is the thing about Maya. She does not help people because somebody is watching. Ethan glanced toward Emma again. The monitor continued its gentle rhythm. Steady. Reassuring. Alive. Everything he valued most in the world sat a few feet away because of a woman he had completely misunderstood. For the first time all day, Ethan stopped thinking about regulations, citations, and authority. Instead he thought about character. About humility. About the difference between enforcing rules and seeing people. Somewhere else inside the hospital, Maya Reynolds was preparing to leave after a long day. She had no idea that the lesson she quietly lived every day had already begun changing someone else's life. It was nearly 9 o'clock when Ethan finally found her. The hospital corridors had grown quieter. Visitor traffic had thinned. The bright energy of the afternoon had given way to the softer rhythm of night. Overhead lights reflected against polished floors, creating long ribbons of pale gold stretching through the hallways. Ethan followed directions from a nurse and eventually reached a small waiting area near the donor center. There, seated beside a window overlooking the city, was Maya Reynolds. She sat alone with a paper cup of tea resting between her hands. Beyond the glass, Charlotte glowed beneath the darkness, thousands of lights scattered across the horizon like distant stars. Maya appeared peaceful, almost as though the day had never weighed on her at all. Ethan stopped several feet away. For the first time since joining the police force, he found himself struggling to find the right words. Maya noticed him and looked up. Her expression remained calm. "Officer Walker." Hearing his name spoken so gently only deepened his discomfort. Ethan lowered his eyes briefly before speaking. "Emma is my daughter." Maya's face softened immediately. "How is she doing?" The question arrived without hesitation. No accusation. No bitterness. Only concern. Ethan swallowed hard. "The doctors believe she is going to be okay." Maya smiled. A genuine smile. The kind that appeared when good news mattered more than personal feelings. "That is wonderful." Silence followed. The sounds of distant footsteps echoed through the hallway. Somewhere nearby, a machine beeped softly. Ethan finally took a seat across from her. "I owe you an apology." Maya said nothing. She simply listened. "This morning I thought I understood the situation." Ethan stared down at his hands. "I thought I was doing my job correctly. But I never stopped to understand why you were there. I never stopped to see the person standing in front of me." The words came slowly now, stripped of pride. "And after everything, you still helped save my daughter." Maya looked toward the window for a moment. Reflections of city lights shimmered across the glass. "Officer Walker," she said quietly, "people are more than the worst moment someone sees." Ethan felt his throat tighten. Maya continued, "You were trying to do your job. I was trying to help someone. Sometimes life puts two people on different sides of the same situation." Ethan shook his head. "Most people would not be this kind." Maya laughed softly. Not mockingly. Not proudly. Just warmly. "Kindness is easier to carry than anger." The simple truth of the statement settled between them. Ethan realized that everything he had assumed about strength had been incomplete. Real strength was sitting across from him now. Not loud. Not powerful. Not demanding recognition. Just quietly choosing grace when resentment would have been easier. He reached into his pocket and removed the citation receipt from earlier that day. Looking at it now felt almost absurd. A piece of paper that had seemed important only hours ago. Maya glanced at it and smiled again. "Keep it," she said. "Maybe someday it will remind you of something more valuable than parking rules." For the first time all day, Ethan smiled too. And somewhere upstairs, Emma slept peacefully through the night, unaware that the woman who had helped save her life had just taught her father one of the most important lessons he would ever learn. The next morning arrived wrapped in soft gray light. Rain clouds drifted above Charlotte, turning the city quieter than usual. Inside St. Matthew's Medical Center, Emma Walker sat upright in bed eating breakfast and smiling for the first time in days. The color had returned to her face. The fear that had gripped Ethan's heart the night before had finally begun to loosen. He sat beside her, listening as she talked about school, her friends, and the art project she wanted to finish when she got home. Every word felt like a gift. Across the room, sunlight occasionally broke through the clouds and painted thin streaks of gold across the floor. Life was returning to normal. Yet Ethan knew something inside him had changed forever. Later that afternoon, after Emma was discharged, Ethan stopped by the hospital lobby before leaving. The same glass doors opened and closed. The same volunteers greeted visitors. The same parking lot stretched beyond the windows. But everything looked different now. Near the entrance, he noticed Mrs. Collins arranging brochures on a display stand. She smiled when she saw him. "Your daughter is doing better," she asked. Ethan nodded. "Thanks to Maya." Mrs. Collins smiled knowingly. "That sounds like her." Ethan looked through the windows toward the place where the gray SUV had been parked. The curb looked ordinary now, just painted concrete beneath a Carolina sky. Yet he understood that some moments divide a life into before and after. A few days later, he received a small envelope in the mail. There was no return address. Inside was the citation receipt he had nearly thrown away. Attached to it was a handwritten note. The handwriting was neat and simple. It read, "We all see the world through our own window. The important thing is learning when to look through someone else's." There was no signature. None was needed. Ethan folded the note carefully and placed it inside his wallet. Months passed. Emma grew stronger. The seasons changed. Summer gave way to autumn. One cool October evening, Ethan and Emma volunteered at a community event delivering meals to seniors. As they carried boxes into a neighborhood center, Emma spotted a familiar face across the room. "Daddy," she whispered excitedly. "It is her." Maya Reynolds stood near a table helping organize supplies. She wore the same quiet smile. Nothing about her demanded attention, yet people naturally gathered around her. Ethan watched as she listened to an elderly man, comforted a worried mother, and encouraged a nervous volunteer. She moved through the room the same way she had moved through life, leaving things better than she found them. Emma walked over and wrapped her arms around Maya. Maya smiled and hugged her gently. No speeches followed. No dramatic words. Just a simple moment between two people connected by kindness. As the evening ended, Maya stepped outside into the cool autumn air and walked toward her car. A breeze carried golden leaves across the sidewalk. Behind her, laughter drifted from the community center windows. Ahead of her, the city lights shimmered softly beneath the darkening sky. She paused for a moment, looking upward as the wind rustled through the trees. Then she smiled and continued walking. And in the quiet that followed, it seemed as though the world itself understood a truth that required no explanation at all. Real strength was never about power. It was always about compassion.